I've never told you this story. You said, think what your business would be like if it was 10 times bigger. And you said it's easier to do 10x than 2x.
Yep.
Me to go from 1 to 2 was the biggest decision I ever made in business. So the longer you carry that on, the worse it gets. And the more you're being penalised in your own business. Now up to 2 million mark.
Yep.
And you can't mess about with those numbers. Saying no is really hard in business. Getting rid of we're getting better at saying no right at the beginning. Now we are not getting distracted. We're really focused on what it is that we do, and we do it over and over again, and we do it well.
So welcome to another episode of the Grown Up Business Podcast. I'm super excited for today's conversation. If you are an entrepreneur who wants to know how to scale to 7 figures, follow your passion, and just create a business that changes people's perceptions on what your home can be like, what your garden can be like, and really create a massive amount of value and a ton of lessons, you're in for a treat in this episode. I'm super excited to have with me today an award-winning garden designer and a lady I've known for, we were talking about this before we came in, we reckon, nearly at least 15 years? 15 years we've known each other, worked with each other. Please welcome to the podcast, Sheena Marsh, ladies and gentlemen. Great to have you with us.
Thank you, Paul.
It's really cool to have you with us.
Lovely to be here.
So let's go back a bit to the first time we met and tell that story, because I think it's interesting about how we started our journey, and then we can unpack what you've learned as a leader, building the team you've built and growing the 7-figure business. We'll come to that. But let's just talk about how you and I first met, because it kind of is something that I don't talk about very often. But yes, I do the business stuff, but I think I'm quite into the woo-woo stuff as well, right? So we met at an event.
Definitely into woo-woo, Paul. I can categorically say.
Fair enough. All right, it's out there now. We can't take it back. But we met at an event in Oxfordshire.
Yes.
Where I brought a speaker over from Canada, a gentleman by the name of Michael Lozier.
Yes.
Who had written a book called Law of Attraction.
Yes.
And had actually been Oprah Winfrey's Law of Attraction coach, actually. He'd been on the show, and he's on her radio show in the States and done some stuff, which is, and I can't even remember how I met him actually. But yeah, we brought him to the UK. What was it about that event that attracted you? Because you and I had never met before that event. So what was it about that attracted you to come into that event?
I sort of knew a little bit about the law of attraction, but not much. And somebody invited me, and I thought, yeah, that's an event I want to go to. It seems it's on trend. I'll go and see what it's about.
And have you always been a person that's been into that side of? Have you been spiritual personally, or is
absolutely not?
So that was quite a big leap then, coming to an event about law of attraction, right?
Yeah.
I remember quite a lot. We've got the footage somewhere of that presentation, but I still remember a lot of that presentation.
I do as well.
Which is how good Michael was.
I've got his book.
Have you?
Well, the thing is about him is he put it in a very simple way.
Yep.
I think it was the Rhonda Byrne, The Secret.
Yes.
That was. I think I watched the film or something, and that sparked an interest. And then he explained it so well.
He did.
So yes, I remember that, and then meeting you and the team.
Yes.
And it felt good. It felt like a good match for me. What you were doing.
Yeah. Well, back then we had what was probably the largest networking club in Oxfordshire at the time, I would imagine, or one of them.
It was really good.
I mean, that was 100. I remember the numbers. It was 110 people came to that breakfast. Yeah. And I remember Michael Lozier saying to me, if you can get 110 Brits out of bed at 7 o'clock in the morning to go and learn how to, you're doing something right. Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, it was no, because I'd been to quite a few networking things, because I'd already started business then, and I was sort of around the edges, using networking as a sort of marketing tool.
Yeah.
And then I went to yours, and it was honestly, I'm not saying this to flatter you, but it was definitely the best, because it was about education.
Yes.
As well as just networking and meeting other people. I mean, we did all that naturally.
Yes.
But you really, really taught, and I valued that, and I still do. I'm still learning.
We're as a wheel. Never. It's a journey, right?
It's a journey.
So let's go back in your journey in terms of when you started your business, let's go back to what made you start it. Because from memory, you were a teacher before, right?
Yeah.
You started out. Did you start out as a teacher? Was that all of your career before then, or
mostly?
Mostly.
Yeah.
And had you always had a passion for gardening, for
Yes.
design? Has that always been a big part of?
Yes, but it doesn't pay very well.
Well, or is that something that you were just told that it doesn't pay very well?
Told it didn't pay very well.
Right.
In gardening, it's got a reputation for being poorly paid. Plus, I thought teaching fitted in well with children.
Right.
Which it does.
Yeah.
But then there were occasions when I have 3 children, and there were occasions when I needed to be with my children in school, and my children needed me to be at, say, a Christmas play or something, and you can't do both. So actually, teaching doesn't really fit in massively well if you have young children.
Do you think that's why? Was that one of the main drivers then? Was it the freedom of choice or time or control of your
That's
time?
a good question, Paul. No. In fact, the main driver was I've never told you this story.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah, but this is quite an interesting story. So what happened was I was quite happily being in a partnership with another teacher.
Right.
And she went off to do another thing. So I had to be partnered with another teacher. And this guy was new into teaching. I was, by this stage, a fairly experienced teacher, but I didn't want to be full-time.
Right.
So he came in, he had been in the forces, and there was a policy then of bringing people into teaching from the forces, specifically men.
Okay.
Because in primary school, there are very few male teachers.
Yeah.
And the guy had a very different set of values to my own, shall we say.
Right.
And actually, in fact, I was in a situation where I was being bullied.
Wow.
It was, yeah. And I don't know whether you've ever been in a situation where you've been bullied, but
yeah, badly at school. Yeah.
At school.
Yeah. I mean, they tried to put me on antidepressants when I was 16 because I was so. I don't think I've ever told you that either.
No.
I know because I was so badly bullied at school. The school wanted me to either leave, which I didn't want to do, or they wanted to put me on antidepressants at 16. And luckily, my mum, who's a nurse, just flat out refused and said, "No, that's not going to happen. We're going to deal with the issue and the bullying thing."
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a very I think it's a very private experience because no one knows you're struggling, do they? Like nobody.
Well, I mean, they did.
Right.
Yeah, no, it was, it was this guy was not just bullying me, of course. He was bullying, it came out afterwards, bullying children. There was all sorts of repercussions.
Correct.
But the effect on me as his partner in, a relationship that's actually quite a close relationship.
Yeah.
We just couldn't work together.
Yeah.
I, in the end, I mean, it actually is upsetting talking about it and hearing what you're saying as well, because it's one of those things that, first of all, I didn't think I was the type,
Yeah.
I thought I was a fairly strong character and I thought I was confident enough. But it's really, it's the day-to-day insinuations, the put-downs.
Yep.
And it gets you.
Yeah.
So I questioned everything. So in the end, I wasn't sleeping well, and I went to my GP, and she said, "Stop there. I've heard enough. I don't know how you've put up with all that's gone on. I'm going to sign you off for 3 months off work. Right. Give you a break.
Okay. Get
your head back together again.
Yep.
And then see." So in that 3 months, I'd always wanted to do garden design.
Okay.
So, hey, talk about changing things from, making, what do they say, lemonade, make lemonade.
Yeah, turn lemons into lemonade.
Oh gosh, this was awful. It was the worst thing that had ever happened to me, and at that stage of my life. And so I did this course in garden design when I had the 3 months off, and I never looked back.
Do you feel that sometimes the worst event in your life is actually a doorway to the best opportunity?
Yeah.
Because I do
believe that.
Yeah.
I look back, I would say, I mean, the sight of the man would make me feel sick, physically ill. But I would now, if I met him, I'd go up to him and say, "Thanks very much. You did me the best favor you could ever have done," because I would still be teaching now.
Wow. It's just really weird, isn't it? It's like, there's one of my favorite quotes, and I can't, it's a Chinese quote that says, we live life forwards and understand it backwards.
Exactly.
And for me, I think the spiritual skill is to be able to go, life is happening for me, not to me.
Yes.
I have to just trust that there's a process and a bigger game here.
Exactly.
Then I can kind of understand where I'm at the level I'm at. It's a bit like climbing the mountain, really, for me. It's like sometimes you're climbing the mountain and you slip backwards, but by slipping backwards, you see a path you didn't see before.
Yeah.
But you can't see the top of the mountain yet because you're still too far down and there's fog and all that stuff. So it's hard to trust it. But I think the more you can trust the process,
Yeah.
I think the more it opens you up to going, oh, well, hang on a second, there's a door here I can walk. You have to walk through it.
Oh, of course. Oh, it doesn't happen by accident.
No.
No, that was hard work.
Yeah.
That course was seriously hard work.
Right.
But, I mean, wow, I'd never have done it if I hadn't been given that gift.
And I think that's
the gift of time.
That's the gift, isn't it? That was the gift in the middle of all of that, was the 3 months you would not have had before.
Yeah.
So did you, when you done the course, did you just go back and resign and start straight away? Or like, what did you?
No, it was a transition.
Okay.
So that was in early, 22. I can't remember when it was. Anyway, late 90s maybe.
Right.
So after that, I part-time teaching, actually used to do private tuition.
Oh, right.
Yeah, for children who wanted to get into private school, and also children who were struggling at school, which was a really good thing to do, because that fitted around the course as well.
Yeah.
And what happened then in the end was I was doing garden designing and I was part-time teaching, and I also had 3 children who at that stage were quite young.
Right.
And I was being stretched in far too many ways, and something had to give.
Yeah.
And the teaching gave.
And so were you scared when you made that decision to kind of go out and start?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And I had a box because I used to go to children's houses and do private tuition. And I had a box of tools that I used to use, kit to, games and stuff.
Right.
And that I kept for 10 years.
What, just in case?
That was my safety net.
Just in case you had to go back?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And I remember it was actually, it was after I met you that I finally threw that box away and thought, this is it. I'm not going back now. Definitely not. So it took
That's interesting.
time.
So what changed in how you approached the business when you made that decision? Like when because I think sometimes the path ahead doesn't show up until you're fully committed. If you always leave room for a big doubt plan, it's like, well,
that's what you said, Paul, and I always listen to what you're saying.
Well, you always, I think that in the entire time I've worked here, I've said this before, I said, you are one of the best people I've ever worked with and coached who you take the coaching and then you just go implement it. And you go, and so many people I've coached over you give them the coaching, they go, yeah, that's a good idea. And then they don't do stuff with it. Whereas you, I remember you were in my mastermind for a good couple of years and you would absolutely do way more than people with higher kind of activating energy in the room who'd get super excited. But you'd be the one who'd just write down all the notes. And the next time we all got together, you'd be the one that ticked everything off and the others had all got distracted. And I think, so do you think, have you always been able to focus then? Or did it start when you made that commitment?
I know I'm a focused person.
What's your strategy? Like, how do you stay focused?
So once I decide what I'm doing,
right,
I will just get on and do it. And you have an expression that you say, have the vision, and then do the work.
Yes.
And I actually believe in that.
There are a lot of people who have the vision and they don't want to do the work. Yeah. It's like, I'd like this to happen. Well, yeah, so would I, right?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah. No one accidentally builds a multi-million pound business. It doesn't, it doesn't happen by accident.
No. And after we met and after we did that, the law of attraction, and the more I thought about it, and another thing, if we carry on a little bit, let's
jump around and go.
So then you said something about imagine. I remember the turnover at that time was £54,000. 54,000. And I was thinking, I really must be careful not to go over the VAT threshold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is where, for those outside the UK, that's where tax kicks in, and you start having to charge 20%, or about, I think back then it was about 17.5%, wasn't it? Back then, or might even mean 15%, showing my age.
Can't remember.
Yeah, but then you have to do
it
that.
added on
Yeah.
to the price.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I've got to be really careful here. And you just changed that. You just blew that out of the water. You said, think what your business would be like if it was 10 times bigger. And you said it's easier to do 10x than 2x.
Yep. Because you can't think in incremental terms. I mean, that's a great book, to be fair to the author. I forget my name. 10x is easier than 2x. But the principle for me was always like, if you think 10 times bigger than you are, then you have to redesign how you're going to build the business. You can't do it alone, first of all. That's the single biggest shift, I think. I think if you had stayed below the threshold, firstly, there's a whole scarcity mentality running around with that one, isn't there? Which is like, oh, if I go above, people won't value my services. If I have to charge the VAT on it, they won't. And especially if you're selling direct to people in their home, right? There's a whole limiting belief piece around what people will and won't pay for, which is interesting, considering where you're at now and what some of the people spend for some of the gardens you design. So I think it's kind of interesting, that journey of like, if you'd played small, you would never be dealing with the kind of gardens you're dealing with now, or designing what you're designing now.
Exactly.
So was that the moment that you started to think, okay, did you get a different vision at that point then? Did your vision shift?
Yes.
In what way?
Every way. I just started doing morning visualizations. That's another thing.
Cool.
That I'll throw in a call back at you because you did this. I think there was a book that that morning, your
Miracle Morning.
Miracle Morning.
Yep. Good book. Great book, actually.
You recommend things. I read it, and if it's relevant to me, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that we did that wasn't relevant, but if it's relevant, I just get on with it and I do it, and I put Miracle Morning into practice. I used to do that. Go out with the dog every morning. I used to do the visualization stuff. So I basically planned my life at that time, how it was going to be. And has it worked out exactly as I expected? Of course not. But more or less, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, more or less.
And in some ways, sometimes it works out better than you expected too, because the stuff you couldn't have factored in because you didn't know about it. Like winning the awards you've won, that probably wasn't.
No, I didn't. No, I wouldn't have thought that. No, but I set the vision, definitely.
So I want to take you back to a time when we had a conversation, and I remember exactly where I was in the office. I remember which office I was in, and I remember it was pre-Christmas. I think it was December pre-Christmas, and you rang up and asked for a phone call about hiring your first person.
I remember where we were as well.
right. And the reason I think there are some, I've done tens of thousands of hours of coaching calls, but there are certain ones that I think are pivotal in people's journey and certain conversations I remember. But I think hiring your first person is one of the biggest shifts in identity that an entrepreneur can make. When you go from it's just you,
definitely.
When you're a solopreneur, scrappy, doing all that stuff, to hang on a minute, I'm taking somebody on and I've got to find payroll now every month to pay them. And there's this totally different shift in identity when that happens, right?
Yeah.
Just walk us through how you felt hiring your first person.
Well, I wasn't confident, and I made mistakes, but there was a lot of learning from that. For me to go from 1 to 2 was the biggest decision I ever made in business.
Wow.
Yeah, without any shadow of doubt.
Okay.
It was huge.
Right.
And that, I think, is probably why we both remember the conversation so well, because it really, until then, I'd use subcontractors, but it just wasn't working out very well. And you said, if you can afford to pay the salary, because I was worried about money.
Yep.
And you said, if you can afford to pay the salary for the first 3 months, that person will pay you back after 3 months, and then and I thought, okay, I can invest 3 months of the salary. Yeah, I can do that.
Yep.
And that's how it started.
And I think what's interesting is that I think as you build out a team, you hire better people.
Yes.
But that feeling doesn't, you get it again at each level, right? When you hire the first person who's say over 50,000, you go through, but you go through the same feelings of like, is it going to be worth it?
Can I pay for this?
Yeah. What if it doesn't work out?
Yeah.
And then, I've had clients when they hire their first £100,000 exec or senior leader, director in the business, whatever, and they go through the same fears, the same feelings. And I think it's really important for if you're growing and scaling a business, to understand that feeling doesn't change just because you get bigger. It's the same feeling every time you step up to a different level of investment in people.
Definitely.
Have you found that with some of the other because you brought your team now 30 odds around that?
Yeah.
Around that?
So now I don't get involved in the recruitment process whatsoever. We've hired people and we fired them and I've never even met them. It's just not part of it. But obviously for the bigger hires, I'd get involved with that, definitely. But the feeling never goes.
What would be your top tips for people around certainly early hires? Because I think if you get that wrong, that can set you back quite. If you get the first 3 or 4 and you get 2 wrong, it's a big hit.
Yeah.
What would be your top kind of learnings from when you started to build out a small team?
Okay. Take your time over hiring. Really take your time.
Yeah.
And then if it's not working out, get rid very quickly.
Yeah.
Because the thing I've done, the biggest mistake, I think, perhaps not quite the biggest mistake, but a very big mistake, is to hope that people are going to work out.
Right.
And they don't.
Yeah.
It's obvious, really.
Do you think that's a trait of entrepreneurs who are just because we're generally optimistic?
Yes.
And then you kind of hope. Is it you hope they work out, or you hope that you can turn them around?
No, I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah. Is that because we just generally like to see the best in people?
I like to see the best in people. And obviously, it's a really unpleasant experience when you have to sack and then, I've been through it several times.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get any easier.
No.
But that very first time when I had to get rid of somebody, that person burst into tears and, it was really traumatic. So you don't want to go through that, of course.
No.
But it's the kindest thing to do, ultimately, is to let somebody go because it's not going to work out and it's never going to work out.
No.
So the longer you carry that on, the worse it gets. And the more you're being penalised in your own business and mentally.
Yes.
So
is that mentally because you know that you need to deal with it and you're just not doing it?
Yeah, and it's distracting.
Yeah. It
takes you away from what you're really supposed to be doing. It takes you away from growth because you're thinking negatively.
Yeah.
Of course you are.
I always think that's the part that people who talk about, entrepreneurs, it's all right for you, that kind of statement. I'm like, you've never sat in a room and had to release somebody. Well, as the phrase I use is release with love.
Yeah.
Because I think it is the kindest thing to do to release somebody to go find a job that's better fitted for them as well, right? And but I think if you've never sat in a room and had to have that conversation and have somebody cry, and you don't know what you're talking about, because that's the hard stuff of running a business that people don't talk about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we had this situation. It came to a head when we had there were, after the first guy, there was another guy and his nephew joined me, and we were all sitting around a table discussing who told a lie and who did this and blah blah blah. And I was thinking, it's like being at school.
So hang on a second, the teacher skills were useful, right?
Oh yeah, teach skills, absolutely. Teaching skills are very, very transferable. The leadership stuff is all transferable into business. But yeah, it was like, it's people don't really grow up.
Do you think that's true? Sometimes you've got a 14-year-old in a 40-year-old's body. You think that's sometimes the case?
I think that's very true.
I remember one of my mentors years ago said you have to realize that some people they stop growing at a certain point emotionally, but physically they keep going. Exactly. So you're talking to a 60-year-old person, but they're still acting like an 18-year-old,
definitely.
And I think that it's hard to that messes with your head sometimes.
Yeah, and I think especially in a business where you're employing people who aren't necessarily academic, or you
Yeah.
know, and they don't come from a sort of background that perhaps you or I have, where
Yeah.
you know we've been trained and our brains have been trained, but they haven't got that.
No.
So, I mean, the you know, one I sort of think it can be sort of immaturity in many ways, and you have to deal with that really differently. And I think also. And again, this is where teaching comes in. You have to be very specific about what it is that you want people to do. You can't expect them to understand what's going on in your head. So you've got to be very, very specific, lay it down very easily,
Yeah.
and then tell them what to do. And people like that.
Yes, I think keep it simple, right?
Keep it simple.
But I think most entrepreneurs are moving so fast in their head.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not, they find transferring that out actually really difficult to do. They find that really hard to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that creative brain.
Yeah.
But I tend not to be, because, I mean, we're talking about all sorts of things that we've done and I've done with my training with you. I tend not to be on that creative side, or on the people side of the. Do you want to explain about?
Well, I think you're more about the relationships and the connection with people than you are
really about that.
The data and the detail.
Yeah, I hate data and detail.
Right, but that's also a risk, isn't it, for you as a leader? Because actually, not having good data, not having good numbers, that's a real risk while you're growing.
Real risk. Yeah, real risk. So what did I do about that? Hire somebody who does like data, and that was so releasing the day. Because I've been trying to train myself. And I remember you said, that's the teacher in you.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I've got a weak skill there. I know it's a weakness. So I got books on accountancy, accountancy for dummies.
All right, yes.
And I was trying to train myself on how to read management accounts. But in the end, you've got to go with the flow. You've got to go with what you're best at and really work at that. And that releases you to do things that make you thrive.
Yeah.
And then you take somebody on to do things that make them thrive. And actually, it hadn't occurred to me that some people actually like spreadsheets. It's a revelation.
Yep. And they don't necessarily like talking to people, which they find really weird that you do.
Yeah.
But I think that's interesting because you brought in an FD, but it's quite late in terms of, do you wish you'd brought an FD in earlier?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think that's given you? Is it given in terms of having an FD now? What's it given you?
Well, we were acting on fact, instead of supposition and hope. We were relying on a good bookkeeper,
right,
and an okay accountant for making really serious financial decisions, because we're now up to around about the 2 million mark.
Yeah.
And you can't mess about with those numbers. This we really have got to get a handle on it. So until I think it's only been about 7 or 8 months that we've taken on an FD, financial director, and he's
CFO releases. Yeah, a lot of people call it CFO as well. So Chief Financial Officer. Yeah, but yeah.
And he's really helped us so much, looking at the numbers, forecasting, making predictions. And I hadn't realized how important that was, because I'm not a numbers person. But yeah,
that's a different skill, isn't it? Once you get to 7 figures, suddenly the skill of forecasting, cash flow projections, understanding where your business is in real time becomes a critical. It's very risky not to have that stuff. It's like highly risky.
It's like driving a high-speed train without a driver.
I would say technically not driving it. That's just hanging on, right?
It's hanging, yeah. Hoping
it works out.
You get to your destination.
Yeah. I think, I remember having a conversation on retreat with another client, Paul Sheridan, who was, I don't do numbers. I'm a sales and marketing guy. And then one of the guys that we both know, Jeff, said to him, you can't be a CEO and not at least understand the numbers. Even you don't have to learn how to put them together, but you sure need to know how to understand.
You do have to know.
Yeah. And I do think it's a skill that gets you from 1 to 5 million is you've got to understand the financial model and how it works. Otherwise, especially at the moment in the environment we're all operating in, where costs are going up, raw materials are going up. If you're not aware of margins, you can be really busy and not making any money.
Which is exactly where we were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Busy fools.
Was that because
Well, we didn't have any.
you didn't have any data?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We weren't acting on fact.
I think that the biggest thing that's changed for me in the last 6 months is I've become way more obsessive about data in all areas of my life, actually. Like health data, much better tracking with what I've got with that. Just across the businesses that I own, I've got much better dashboards now than I had even 6 months ago. And the interesting thing is, the more I look at the data, the better the decision making I feel I have, because I'm actually looking at numbers and seeing trends, and then looking at real margins versus what you think you're making. And
Yes.
I think that leveling up of data and dashboards is a critical skill for a leader to go, actually, we're not getting enough, and we're not drilling down enough to really understand what's happening. Did you find that with different jobs? Because obviously you do different sizes. Just to give people that, so let's talk about the kind of gardens that you design. I mean, it goes from sort of 10,000 up to 100,000 potentially, different size.
Minimum would be 10.
Minimum 10.
Yeah, and the maximum 150,000.
Which is which is crazy when you think that's nearly double or at least double of what your turnover was when you were worried about hitting that in one job, right?
And that's not that long ago. Whoa.
So is that just because? Okay, so was that because you shifted who your ideal client was, or is that because you shifted how you were marketing to them?
A bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah. Once you've attracted an ideal client, then you know what you can market to.
Right.
So I just literally just changed my brain from let's be careful, let's be cautious mentality to no, actually, this is what I want. This is the type of people that we want to be dealing with. Our ideal clients are just a delight. You know, they would just make life so easy when you attract the right people.
It is.
And also the saying no is really hard in business. You know, getting rid of the time wasters, the drainers, the people that they're never going to be a good fit for your business. So you really should, and again, it's difficult to do, but you really, and we're getting better at saying no right at the beginning.
Right.
Because people don't realize that it's a two-way thing.
Yes.
Our clients don't realize that we're choosing them just as much as
Yeah, that's such a great point. I was having a conversation with in F12 about that, and sort of somebody was saying, well, I just have to take everybody. And I was like, well, that belief is a scarcity belief for a start, isn't it? Yeah. I can't get enough of the right people, first of all. And secondly, then it goes back to that, well, if that's what you're putting out, then that's what you're going to attract.
Yes.
It's like, you're not going to attract the right caliber people if you're not even aware of what they look like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you think, was there a project that kind of changed your perspective on what you do, or gave you a different insight into just how valuable helping people create these amazing spaces in their homes was? Is there one you can think of where you went that, and it doesn't necessarily mean it was a big one, but it was a one that you went,
No. It was a garden in Tame, and I still think about them because they were just such lovely clients. They were doctors, and actually she was a lawyer who'd also done a degree in medicine, and they were so highly educated, lovely couple, cardiologist he was, and their garden, because they were highly stressed, their garden gave them so much pleasure. It was a delight, and it wasn't about the money. In the end, it was an expensive garden, and they invested a lot of money in it. I think it was about 50,000. And again, that was different for me, thinking in terms of that scale of money to deal with. That would have frightened me even a couple of years before.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. We're going back a long time now, and the pleasure they got out of that garden, it was just their space to relax, again, I'm getting on a bit of a hobby horse of mine, but I really believe that gardens can be restorative in terms of mental health, just actually physically working in a garden. You've got to go at nature's pace. You can't sort of say to that, the seedlings that are growing now. We just seeded our lawn.
Hurry up.
The dogs made a mess with us. We could seed the whole thing in. Is like grow.
Do you think we've lost that? Have we lost that perspective?
We have lost that perspective. Yeah, we have lost that perspective. I'll tell you, we were talking earlier on about, I came back from Berlin last week.
Yes.
For the podcast. Berlin is a fantastic city, but it's quite, for me, soulless because the trees were chopped down during the war and after the war because people needed the firewood. There are no mature trees at all.
Really?
No.
Wow.
Not one. And I suppose because I'm more aware of that sort of stuff, I found that soulless.
It's definitely quite a sort of it's quite a hard city. It feels it like it's all concrete. It's architecturally quite, or I found it quite hard. Yeah, it's amazing, but it also feels like that. I hadn't really put the two together, but it's the lack of the softening of the trees and the nature side of it.
Yeah.
But I think we've lost that connection to timing that comes with nature.
I think we have.
And I think we're all in such a rush to get everything done. It's like, well, I planted the seeds on Tuesday. Surely I should be able to have a garden by Friday and live in it by Sunday. It's like, well, hang on a second. There's and I think that's true with a business. There are seasons in a business. Do you think that's helped you?
So true.
Do you think that's helped you to understand I can't just force this thing to grow. I've got to nurture it. Do you think that?
I think that's very much part of my personality.
Yeah.
Yeah. I try very hard not to make things happen. I direct rather than force.
Nice.
Which is how I operate in my garden.
Yeah. But I think that probably makes it feel less kind of male energy, I guess, of aggressive.
I think that's maybe it. It's a bit gentler.
Yeah.
And I think also gardeners, the people that we employ, and actually gardeners as a species, they're quite a jolly bunch. They're usually gardeners
because they're outside.
Yeah. They're outside, and it's only sometimes we stand and we look and we see. Actually, we've got a pair of red kites nesting.
Oh wow!
In one of and we were just stood there the other day. A few of us were in the garden. We looked and we just didn't say anything for a few minutes. And you just look. You look at nature. You slow down. It calms you.
Yeah.
And then you're ready to go.
Yeah.
And then you're ready to get your rotovator out or whatever other piece of machine.
Recharge. I think we've become disconnected from seasons because of the way we also farm and all that kind of stuff. We've lost the connection to the season.
Oh, we have lost the connections to the season. We expect to have courgettes in for Christmas, or
or strawberries in December, and you're like, this isn't like great. It's not right. It's like I think
it's not right.
Sue and I have switched much more to trying to focus on just eat what's naturally in season, and then understand that.
You probably feel better for it.
Yeah, I think we do, and I think, but it just feels like we're more trying to be tuned into what's happening around us rather than going, I want strawberries and I want them in the middle of January in the snow because I want them. It's like, well, hang on a second. That's not how nature set it up. No. It's like, and I think with a business, sometimes we do this. I've seen people do this with marketing is they'll run marketing. They'll do a marketing campaign. Won't even do a campaign. They'll run a new website, put it up. And if it doesn't make the money in the first 2 or 3 weeks, they're really upset. And they're like, it hasn't worked. And I'm like, you just planted seeds. Like, we don't have any data yet. It's not been up for 4 or 5 weeks. We don't know how the market's responding to it yet. We haven't learned anything. Like, what makes you think it's suddenly going to change your life in 4 weeks? It's like, it might take 3 months to refine it, perfect it. And I think it's true too with a team. Sometimes you have to cut back to grow, right? In the same way you do in nature.
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, we've pruned recently, Paul. I think you're leading on to that.
No, I wasn't actually. I was just saying, you do though, don't you? I think it's part of.
You have to cut out a bit of dead wood occasionally.
Yeah. Yep.
In order to make everything thrive.
Yes, but I think we've lost
looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah, but I think we've lost that. So I think sometimes entrepreneurs feel guilty about doing that, rather than going, actually, a part of this stage is to cut it back.
I think that's true. Yeah.
Rather than going, oh no, I always want to be in growth mode. No, you can't always be in growth mode. It's not possible.
No, it's not possible.
It isn't.
No, and it hasn't been possible recently. And I think that's what you were alluding to. So recently we haven't been able to grow, and it's salutary. We saw a declining inquiries, external factors. So you can only control what you can control.
Yeah.
And sometimes that does require pruning, and the pruning is often quite a good thing to do. Is for the people that have been pruned.
Yep. Or products or services. Doesn't just have to be people, right?
Yeah.
Can be certain sides of the business you go, cut that out because it's not making us any money.
Making us any money.
Yep.
There's another thing that we made a mistake on.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because I think there's a really interesting lesson in. There was a part, the business was doing really well. You're probably over $1 million at that point, I would say.
When
you chose to suddenly sort of do an add-on to it.
Direction.
Yeah. Well, I would say, I think it was that I think there was a distraction. You added something in.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Right.
Well, we weren't working with you at that time. We were having our sabbatical.
Yes, you went off.
We did, which was a mistake.
Well,
we went off piece.
Sometimes you have to learn by going away to come back, right? That's fine. But I think, what did you? Firstly, what was the intention, and then what was the impact? Because I think they're two different things. What was the intention of the decision?
The intention was purely financial.
Right.
It was a decision that was made that was entirely based on, we thought it was an easy product to sell,
right,
as an addition to what
you do
already. Yeah.
Right.
And that was a mistake. And I would advise anyone in business, do not make decisions based purely on financials, because if it doesn't fit with your values, it's never going to work.
Yeah. Was that the difference? Was it? It was a massive values. Who was it? It just wasn't aligned with. Right.
It wasn't aligned with us. It wasn't aligned with what my values, and I felt that, and the people they were lovely, but it just didn't feel a good fit. And I chose not to follow my instincts, and that's always a mistake. Always follow your gut.
Yeah, well, I think you get a lesson about the value of listening to your gut, right? Because 9 times out of 10, it's telling you, it is a part of your brain. It does actually communicate with you for a reason. Yeah. And let's be honest, I've made some interesting choices in the last 2 or 3 years that haven't worked out. And I think there's a part of me that wished I wanted it to work.
That's it.
Yeah. I was like, my gut, my gut's going, it's wrong, and you're going, yeah, no, but I'm going to overrule that, and I'm going to prove I was right, and it's like, and eventually you have to kind of realize that, I should have listened to you at the very beginning. This is never going to work out, and I think there's that moment when you kind of have to admit to yourself that you didn't listen to yourself. And go, right, okay, I've got to. I know. Yeah, well, that was really hard for me. I don't know about you.
It is really hard to admit that and ultimately it's your decision, isn't it? Although I was being heavily influenced, I think if I'd said no, that would not have gone ahead. I should have said no. And there was just a little voice. It was just, anyway.
But what came, I was going to say, what came out of it though? Like, did it give you a renewed focus on the core business?
That's what it did.
Right.
And so now we are not getting distracted. As we discussed in the last few months, we've pruned a little bit. We're really focused on what it is that we do, and we do it over and over again, and we do it well.
Yep.
And we can do it easily, and it's not very exciting. It's boring. Not boring. That's not
predictable.
It's predictable.
Yeah. But that's a good business, by the way. I think a good business one is that's predictable. You get this many leads in, you have this many conversations, you convert this many customers, you make this much profit. It's predictable.
Yeah.
The challenge, I think, is that most entrepreneurs get bored with that and then go, well, no, it's got boring now. I need to change it, or I need to do something else.
That's what we did. I think we got a little bit.
Just it's got boring.
Yeah.
Yeah. Without realizing that boring is actually brilliant sometimes. Yeah. Which is hard to get your head around, isn't it?
It's hard. It's
because you're like, I thought it was supposed to be really super exciting all the time. And it's like, no, sometimes it is just, but it's predictable, which is actually the goal.
Yeah.
Because that's how you get out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you've managed to achieve something in your career, which is a first, isn't it? So you won a gold medal at the RHS show, yes?
Yes.
Which was in Malvern.
RHS Malvern.
And
we won an RHS Gold at Chelsea, but that was for a trade stand.
Okay.
Another company, a sculptor that we know, a local sculptor, we designed his garden, and that was very, very well received. And that was last year.
Cool. But you won the
year
people's...
before.
Yeah.
That was
Go on, talk me through that.
So the year before, we did a really exciting garden. Again, it's very close to my heart. And you can tell by the way I'm talking now, I'm animated about
it's lovely.
because as opposed to when we made the mistake with the other fit. So this was really perfect fit for us. So I, through going to a Keep Fit class, believe it or not, met the chair of the Wildlife Trust, our local chair of the Wildlife Trust. And through her, we decided that we were going to build a garden at Malvern. We'd already built a garden at Malvern the year before, which was very well received. This is RHS show. But this one, we were going for gold. We got a silver gilt, so, not quite good enough. We got to go for gold. And the whole premise behind the garden was to show people on a very simple level what we can do to help nature recover. Because actually, since the war, agricultural practices have actually devastated big chunks of nature, and there's no hiding it. It's there. For example, if you go on a long car journey, maybe 10, 15 years ago, you'd find that you had a load of insects splattered on your window.
Yes.
You don't anymore, do you?
No.
No.
They used to always be over the front of the car.
Yeah.
Stuck to the front of the car.
Yeah.
Not
and
anymore.
You'd stop at a garage and you'd wipe down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's because they're not there.
Wow. That's quite scary.
Exactly. Yeah. And those little insects were doing a lot of good in the environment. I mean, it all is connected, the whole ecology, it's all one thing that leads to another, And so I believe very strongly that there's a lot we can do in gardens to reverse that trend. Now that's there because we can't undo we can undo the damage, but it's not going to be an instant fix. But what we can do in gardens is we can create little, eco climates to help nature.
Yeah.
Introduce plants that are going to attract little bugs and those little creepy crawly things that you might think, they're not doing much in my garden, but actually they are.
Yeah.
So it's about not using chemicals. It's about maybe something like, about Nomo May, do you?
No.
You don't know about Nomo May?
No, educate me.
Don't you?
Great opportunity to educate me.
So that's when how you get your lawnmower out traditionally in at end of March, April, and everybody mows their lawns.
Yes.
Have a striped lawn.
Yes.
Well, instead of doing that, if you let your grass, or even a section of your grass, grow a bit longer,
okay,
that little section of grass that's growing a bit longer will have all sorts of seeds in it and wildflower seeds, and they'll start growing.
Yeah.
And just at the time when pollinating insects are starting to emerge, that's a habitat for them. And so that's what No Mow May is all about. It's about not mowing our lawns, basically.
For a month, basically. Yeah, to help insects out and help nature out.
It really helps. So, again, we're going really off-piste again, but...
No, but I love this because this is the point of having a conversation, right? You're passionate about...
I'm really passionate about it. I really believe in it.
Yeah.
Because you think of all the little gardeners that are up and down the country, all the little... new build garden. Now, this is a real big thing for me because I look at these new build gardeners and they put a small concrete patio, which is pretty useless for anyone.
Yeah.
And then they maybe put turf down over a little, an inch or two of topsoil. That turf's going to fail.
Yeah.
But, it's useless.
Which then makes it worse because people quite often replace it with artificial grass, which is like the worst thing to do in that.
Exactly. And one can't, you can't blame people because... No. But there's so much that we can do. If every single new build garden had, for example, in just one little thing, in the fence, a little hole where a hedgehog could go marching through from one side of the estate to another, that one little thing could help hedgehogs. You think about hedgehogs. That's another thing. Yeah. We used to see them splattered on the road. We don't do it. They're not there anymore.
No.
This isn't...
They haven't suddenly figured out how to cross the road. They haven't suddenly gone, we've had classes, we've all got together and decided that we need to upgrade our skills on crossing the road because we're going to get wiped out if we don't. No, they're just not there anymore.
They're just not there anymore. That's because we haven't got the habitats for them.
So true. I can't remember the last time I saw a hedgehog like in the wild, or like just yeah.
No, and there is a lot we can do, and it's being not quite so neat and tidy in gardens. It's leaving a little pile of leaves so that a hedgehog has somewhere to hibernate over the winter. It's just small things that can make a huge difference. No, I was just talking about No May. So go back to No May. So in our little village where we live in Oxfordshire, it was a hamlet really, and a group of us said, we live in this we've got a lovely green and it's got a little monument in the middle.
Right.
And the local council kind of cut this grass every 2 or 3 weeks. And nobody's ever thought about it. Nobody's ever discussed what would happen if they didn't. So we thought, well, let's just see what happens if we don't cut the grass.
Right.
And honestly, Paul, it was amazing. We had orchids growing on our
No way.
patch. And yes, I won't say where it is, but yeah, we did. It was amazing what was coming through. And all that stuff is so good for biodiversity. And yet we just cut it back without thinking about it. And we think about the machines that, are used. Think about petrol and the cost of the environment and all that. And that's another issue. But, it was I thought it was such a success. However, there were other people in the village who absolutely hated it because, of course, sometimes it doesn't always look good. It looks good in May and June, for example, but come July and August, it's starting to go brown and it didn't look so great. So there are other people, again, very valid reasons, said, I don't like this, or it looks really ugly and it's spoiling our village. So, that's a different point of view, but there's always a compromise. And the compromise could be something like, well, let's just grow some areas use as an example, on our little patch triangle village green. Why don't we leave a lot of it to grow wild, and then some of it could be left mown for the kids to play football and that sort of thing. So it's all about compromise. It shouldn't just be one thing or another. But there's a lot that we can do. And we're just one example in a tiny village in Oxfordshire. Think about all the other little villages.
Well, it's the estates, isn't it, really? I mean, estates, I lived on a estate with Sue for about 10 years, and the challenge was the garden was, it wasn't a garden. It was basically a concrete slab underneath, as you said, a couple of inches of topsoil.
You can't grow anything in it.
We're digging it out. I remember one weekend I tried to dig a hole big enough to put a small tree in the back garden. And I think it took me 8 hours or something of trying, because I just got, every time I'd go anywhere down, I'd hit brick and slab and everything else. And you just go, this is horrific. They don't clean it at the end. They just chuck a bunch of topsoil on and go, that because they're trying to save money, and that's which I get. But
I get that too.
I think it's a really interesting point, because I think I've been guilty of that, certainly in my own house, where I've gone, oh yeah, the lawn doesn't look neat and tidy at the moment. We need to do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Again, it comes back to education, though, don't you think? It's like,
that's why we did the garden at Malvern, to go back around, circle around to that again. So the garden at Malvern, the RHS garden that we did with the Wildlife Trust, was to educate people on small things that they can do in their own garden. And also it was to show that actually the garden doesn't have to look horrible. It can be lovely, but so beneficial. And that garden won, it won a gold medal, it won Best in Show, it won the Best Construction and the People's Choice Award, which is the real big one. It's where the people vote, not just the judges. Yeah. So it 4 different awards for that one garden. And that's only been ever done 3 times before in the whole history of the RHS.
Which is...
So that was epic.
But that also shows the power of passion, right? Because you're so passionate about that. And that subject, and that comes through in the work that you put out there. Whereas the other business that you had that didn't work, you weren't passionate about at all.
And my body language just says it all, doesn't it?
But I think that's...
So you have to listen to that.
Yeah. I often say to people, when the passion leaves, the profit follows. Because if you're not passionate about it, you're never going to make money doing it, because you're not going to put the hours in to become good at it. Yeah. You're not going to do the work, the late nights, the reading, the studying. If you're not passionate about the subject, you're never going to become great at it.
It is just a chore.
Yeah.
And it's not worth it. Life's too short.
It is. It is.
One of the reasons that you become a business owner, again, to circle back round, is freedom, choice, and time, and all that. And then if it becomes, again, you can see my body. It's just a grind, and what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, we're here for an incredibly short period of time, right? Incredibly short period of time.
Yeah.
I think if you go look at if you go look at an ancient tree that's been up like 400 or 500 years, you realize just how incredibly short a time span we are actually here for, right?
Yeah.
But I think like you won because you won Oxfordshire Business Person of the Year, didn't you, as well, right? Like a while back.
West Oxfordshire, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, do you think that was a reflection of just your passion for the business, or was it a sort of a reflection of your passion for the brand and what you love building? Or growing, really, even more growing it, hasn't it?
Well, it was a few years ago now, but I think it was a reflection on leadership skills, I would say.
Okay.
Which sounds arrogant to say, but again, going back to teaching, you're a natural leader. You're leading your little team, and I feel that about my team as well. I care for them. They know it. And it doesn't often happen that if there's an issue, they know that they can come and talk to me. And that filters down as well. I think also you find if somebody doesn't fit in with that, the people that work for us, and they're mostly men. And again, I think that might be part of the reason, it was a woman working in what is basically a man's work, or seen to be a man's.
Yeah.
I regret that, and I'd love to attract more women into our business. But the actual people who do the physical hard work are mostly men. We have one woman.
Wow.
It's a shame.
But did you? That's a really interesting point, actually, because like female entrepreneurs who run 7-figure businesses, so $1 million plus, it's a really small group, right? Like really small group.
Is it?
Yeah, it's tiny actually. And if you look at the numbers, so less than 7% of businesses go over $1 million anyway. Female-led entrepreneurs, businesses that do that, the percentage drops enormously. Like in the UK, there are only 80 women who have ever run scale businesses beyond 50 million. There are only 80 in the whole of the UK. Wow. Yeah, there are 80. And you go, well, like,
oh, hang on.
Yeah, but do you know what I mean? It's like, well, why is that? Is it? And have you ever found that that's been a challenge for you, being in the leadership position? Like, have you had to overcome barriers with that?
No, no.
Or do you just think you were already or were you strong enough because of the bullying? You became quite strong, so therefore.
No, I don't think so.
No?
I think that was it. Oh, I just genuinely think that we tend to work in a business. Well, I don't know. It's a gentler world. The world of gardening. It's not. Well, sorry, no.
It's just interesting that
that's been an issue for me.
It's a small group you're in.
It's my perception of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't realize I was in a small group.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very small group of female entrepreneurs who run 7-figure businesses. I want to encourage more. I mean, we try really hard to make sure that we get a lot of female entrepreneurs to come to our events. Our retreat in Spain that we run every year, that we had, I think 42% of the audience was female entrepreneurs last year. I think something like that. We try really hard to make sure that this, because I think we've got to get away from this thing. It's a successful entrepreneurs are all male, and it's like just not true. It's not true at all. And I think there's a shift in. I think the biggest challenge at the moment is go back to energy and polarity, and I think we are becoming a very male dominated energy leadership wise at the moment, and I think that's going to have issues because it's all very kind of aggressive type leadership stuff. I'm talking bigger, wider world picture stuff. I think we're losing the connection. I think we're losing the empathy, which I think is something you do really well. Where I think that you have a lot of empathy for people. You still have you got to do your job, but I think you've always had. I think one of your leadership skills is around empathy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But don't you think
that comes over
teacher? But don't you think that's the teacher still?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But I think it's probably always been there as well. But on the other hand, I think they'll probably say I'm quite bossy. I mean, I like things doing properly. Having empathy doesn't mean to say you're being a pushover.
No. What's the biggest way you've changed or leveled up as a leader, do you think, since you started? Like when that very first hire up to now, what's the biggest change you'd see in yourself if you look back?
The biggest change in myself is I'm much more decisive now. But you know what? I've made a decision, get on with it. It might be the wrong decision. Whereas I was very much more hesitant before. I mean, it's confidence, actually. It comes with confidence. You know, the more mistakes you make, the more you learn, the more confident you become. And I'm much, much more decisive now.
Do you think that's also because you realize that when you made a decision, it didn't work out, you were able to recover from it?
It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
It's never the end of the world. Yet.
Yeah, well, it's not, is it?
No. Not when we start helping nature.
That's true. Yeah. So just to kind of wrap up, how would you describe a grown-up business out of interest? What do you think? What's your
A grown-up business should be boring, all right? Because it should be just turning the wheel.
Okay.
That's a grown-up business. It's one that it's not massively exciting because it's very predictable, just to go back to what you were saying before. So yeah, that's my definition.
Okay. And what would you say to someone who's never really thought about the fact that law of attraction and spirituality and business can mix together? Like, what would you say? Because I think that's the power when you put the two together. I think if you bring the spiritual side of the universal laws, like everything has a season, which is a universal principle, right? Like everything has a season, everything grows, everything dies. Like there's always a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Absolutely. And if you don't have the season, if you don't have a winter, then you don't appreciate the nice sunny day that we had yesterday. Yeah. You don't have the miserable days.
Yeah.
You know, if you're eating strawberries all year round, then you don't appreciate them when they're into season.
Exactly that. And also think if you don't have a winter, you don't understand that that's actually the time when you need to go inwards and do the inner work before you go out externally in the spring.
Oh my goodness, yes, I learnt that lesson early on when I was in a dip.
Oh, right.
And that's a book that I think...
The Dip.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Seth Godin wrote it. It might be wrong, but I think so. We'll link to it in the show notes below.
I mean, I've had some pretty rough times, and I was in a dip, and everything feels like hard work sometimes. And you said you never make a decision when you're in a dip.
Yeah,
you know that because I was going to pack it all in. It was really hard. You know, one thing after another had gone wrong, and I just thought, what now? I'm just going to give this up. This is too hard, and I'm just going to pack it and go back to teach again or whatever. Or even working in...
Did you get really close to... Was it really close?
Yeah. And now here's a nice segue into law of attraction for you. And the day I went... You'd had your health thing, I don't know.
Reboot, yeah, my health reboot.
Your health reboot.
That's what I call it.
Yeah, so it was a struggle for you to get in. It was a real struggle for me because there was some rubbish job. It was going really badly and I needed to be on site. And yet I did manage to get myself into that meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning and you looked like death.
Well, I had just died, so yeah,
right.
I just survived a major heart attack, nearly died, so yeah, I looked pretty rough.
Yes, you did.
I did, yeah.
And I looked pretty rough as well because I'd had a sleepless night about worrying about what was going on site. And it wasn't you, but I met somebody at that meeting who turned me around and set me straight in the right direction again.
That's so cool.
And that is law of attraction. And sometimes...
But you had to get in the room. I think, you had to get in the room.
Attracted the person who helped me
get out of it. Yeah. But you have to get in the room, right? I always say the hardest meeting to get to is the one that you don't want to go to. You've got all the justifications or stories or excuses or whatever to not go. Is the one that if you can fight through that and get in the room, you'll either hear something from stage or somebody you'll meet, like in that situation, will say something and it will change your life and it will turn you around. And sometimes that's all their job was. You never end up seeing them again or anything like that.
I can't even remember who it
was. But somehow the thing you needed to hear got to you. But if you hadn't been in the room, it wouldn't have got to you.
Yes, exactly.
And I think for me, there's that whole part of like, if you take the word attraction, action is in it, right? If you look at the word attraction, action's actually in it. And it's like, look, you have to participate in this. You can't, if you stay at home, I remember years ago, one of my mentors saying, sometimes the hardest battle is to get past your own front door. And I think that's so true, especially if you don't feel good about it. It's like, you got to get out, because if you're out, you're in the flow, aren't you? You're in the flow of conversations, and stuff happens. It just does.
It just does.
And you meet people and you go, well, that was random, but it wasn't, was it? It was part of something you didn't yet understand how it worked out.
Yeah.
You've reminded me of something I do want to just kind of finish on before we wrap up, which is, didn't you, God, please tell me it was you. Didn't you used to have a rule about who you wouldn't deal with as customers?
Yes.
Because we
still do.
Yeah, right, okay. I think we should finish on this.
We're not going to say.
No, you're not.
But there are red flags. There are loud red flags that people say.
Well, I think it's a really interesting point, though. It's like, if you have a bad experience with with customers, I do think there's a really valuable moment to stop and go, what is the same thing about all of them? Because 9 times out of 10, they'll have something in common, right?
They do, and we have a definite category, it's a professional category, and I'm not going to say anything more than that.
Fair enough.
It won't work for anybody who works in that particular profession.
Just because the kind of person who's attracted to that kind of profession.
Indeed.
And in order to be successful in that profession, has a certain mentality and a way of treating people, and they can't turn it off when they come home. Yeah. Let's put it that way, right?
A very good way of putting it.
Yeah, and I think that's often. I think sometimes we forget that when we deal with people. It's like, what makes people successful in business. That trait it's hard to turn off when you come home if you're not careful, and therefore, if you're dealing with direct with consumers, it's like, actually you're not. You're dealing with with people with different identities all the time. There's the work version of them, there's the home version of them, and sometimes you get the work version of them, and sometimes you get the home version of them, right? Yeah. And they can be quite different.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So, like, what's your vision now? Is the vision just to enjoy or create more gardens with impact? What's the vision?
Okay, so my overall thing that I want, the position I'm in now is the business pretty well runs without me.
Right.
So
congratulations, by the way. Well done. Yeah.
Pretty well. Not all the time, but so I have time to think about what it is that I really want to do in life. And I want to, we've spoken about it already, but my ambition is to help wildlife in gardens and to spread that word. It's this, you said about, it's about education. And I think, if I do that, if I can just make one small change in the world, that would be it. I think
it's going back to your teaching roots then, isn't it?
So important.
Isn't it going back to your teaching roots then? Teaching people about all of this because we've lost connection to it.
Yeah.
You're going back. It's kind of full circle. You're kind of going back to teaching people.
Yeah.
Because we've forgotten that. Like I lost my mum, many years ago, and Sue's lost her parents. It's like, who's teaching the next generation about looking after gardens? It's like, who's teaching us?
Yeah.
And you're kind of, it strikes me anyway, that you're kind of like, you've come out, you've built a business, you've done that, but actually you're going full circle back to teaching people.
Yeah.
About how to connect to nature, how to look after it. You're kind of going back to where you almost started.
Almost, yeah.
Which is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of life goes full circle, right? Like you end up at some point back to the very thing that you did originally.
Yeah. So, you can take the teacher out of the classroom, but you can't take the classroom out of the teacher. That's the saying, and I think it's true.
So, look, thank you first of all to come on the show and sharing your journey to building a grown-up business, which it's been a genuine privilege to work with you along every step of that journey, and I really genuinely mean that too.
I believe it. Honestly, Paul, I couldn't have done it without you. Genuinely, I tell everyone that. And now publicly announced it.
Well, what I want to ask that, I wanted to. I don't not in a like, but what. Why do you think, I want to take a different direction for a sec. Why do you think a lot of people don't invest in themselves? And I don't think it's investing in a business coach. I mean, they don't invest in themselves to get coaching, because I think it's a self-investment. It's investing in you, right? Why do you think people don't, out of interest?
One would be money.
Right.
2 would be they don't see the point. They need educating, right, to understand the difference that it would make.
Yeah.
And 3, I think that often it's lack of confidence. They don't think they're worthy of it.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting point.
Had you thought about that?
I think the money is an excuse because people find money for things that they want.
Yes.
I think, and you'll find people, you must have this, people go, oh, we can't afford that in the garden. And then you turn up to do the version they've told you they couldn't afford. And there's a 50, £100,000 brand new car on the drive. And you're like, so like people will use that as a justification when what they mean is, I just don't see the value in it.
Yeah.
I think there is a really interesting point around imposter syndrome where I think people go beyond where they thought they could, and now they don't feel they deserve to be at that level. Did you ever feel that, just out of interest? Did you ever kind of feel like, oh, I'm not sure I deserve to, like, because I think imposter syndrome is the thing that stops people scaling beyond where they're at because they don't feel they deserve to get bigger, or they don't feel they have the skills for it.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent we all feel that.
Yeah, that's my point, is we all feel it. New level, new devil, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think to a certain extent, I remember we did an exercise ages and ages ago about what's the real problem, what's holding you back, And in the end, I think most of us came back to the feeling that we're not good enough, which is instilled into you when you're at school, probably, or parental or something. Yeah. Maybe an emotion that you had when you were 4 or 5 that's still ruling you. So yes, I think it's quite a scary thing for someone to join a group like, your
join a mastermind, or
your mastermind group.
Yeah.
I think that can be quite off-putting, especially for women. Actually, I would say,
yeah,
with
I would agree.
Humbly, I was fortunate because, of course, there was a group of people that I already knew and connected with, and we joined at the same time. And so for me, it was a pretty easy transition to make. And so I didn't have that feeling. But I can understand now that you've grown that a lot, and it's quite a different thing. I mean, you've got a grown-up business now.
Yeah. Well, it's good to practice what I teach, isn't it, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise there'd be a congruency issue for me of like, I'm teaching you how to build this, but I don't do it.
Exactly.
It's like, what?
Yes. You could be surprised, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
No, I think that's true. And so I think now the way you are, I'm trying to imagine if I was just, where I was, and if I just met, I'd have been intimidated by it.
It's really, I think that's so interesting because I think there's a group, and look, there are some people who run some incredible groups, and I have a massive amount of time and respect for them, but they're only female-only entrepreneurs, and I'm like,
no, I don't believe in that.
The challenge with that is you've got to operate in a world where men exist, right? Like
exactly. No, I don't believe.
You can't walk out of the.
I don't believe in exclusive anything.
No, me neither. I don't believe in industry. Like I wouldn't do just only garden design businesses and go, or I'm only going to do vets, or I'm only going to do dentists. I've always believed there is a massive amount of value in being in a room with people who are not in your industry and look at you and go, why'd you do that? Why'd you do it that way? And you go,
I don't know.
Yeah. Or you look at them and go, well, why are you doing it that way? And the dentist goes, well, because we've always done it that way. And you go, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Why don't you try that? And then you bang, that one idea from outside the industry.
That's the value.
That's the value.
That's the value. Well, I know I've shared this story before, and when we were at the last year with the group that we were talking to about Jeff when we were on the retreat.
Right.
And would you like me to share?
I'd love you to share it to finish us off. Sounds like the perfect way to wrap it up.
So So this was on our when we were in Spain, and we were just in a breakout, and we were just chatting about this, that, and the other. And Jeff, who you've already mentioned, the accountant, successful accountant. I always thought that accountants would be in favour of hanging on to assets and so on. And we were in a position where we needed to spend a lot of money on our house extension. And had a house in that was being rented out. And Jeff said to me, and I said, oh, no, I can't, it's an income, and how do I replace that income? And he said to me, but Sheena, it's your life. And I'm like, oh, yeah, actually, this, it is, isn't it, in the end? And somehow I didn't really expect an accountant to say that, you see. So it's things like that. That's the extra value that you get out of being in your mastermind group. Yeah, or being going away on retreat.
Well, I mean,
out of the environment,
chatting. Yeah.
And that basically it changed our whole life, and we went ahead and did the extension, and it's been great.
With a stunning garden.
With a beautiful 2-acre garden full of wildlife.
Yeah. Well, listen, thanks for coming on the show and thanks for sharing. I've learned loads, frankly. There's a whole section of the garden I'm not going to touch for at least May now, definitely without question, probably longer than that.
I think that's a really good thing to do.
Because I didn't know about that. I hadn't realised the risk of doing that.
Well, it's not a risk.
No, but there's a risk to nature of not helping it in terms of going, look, if you can help, you should, right?
You should do.
Yeah.
Leaving verges to grow, not being quite so neat and tidy, and definitely no chemicals.
Brilliant. Listen, Sheena, thanks ever so much for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing everything. Where can people find out about what you do, learn from you? Because I know you do some great blogs and articles and stuff. Where's the best place to go for people to find out more about what you do?
Head over to our website, I'd say, which is Oxford Garden Design, and we're on Instagram and Facebook.
You do a great Instagram. Your Instagram is awesome, by the way. I love all the seasonal stuff you put on.
Well, there's a lot about wildlife and helping nature.
So we'll drop links in the show notes to your Instagram, and obviously if you're a business owner and you want to follow your journey as well, your LinkedIn profile you're on there as well. And oxfordgardendesign.co.uk is where people can go to find out more and see some of the stunning gardens that you've designed as well.
We've done some lovely stuff.
If you are looking for inspiration on what you could do with your garden, I highly recommend spending some time looking at the before and after photos.
Nice end product.
Yeah.
It gives such pleasure.
Listen, thanks ever so much for being on the show. Great stuff. Take care, and we'll see you on the next show. Make sure that you share this with at least 3 people, and remember the 72-hour rule, which is write down the top 3 things you learned from this episode that you can apply in your life, and make sure you take action so that you get to achieve more of the business that you want and the life you deserve. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care for now. That concludes this episode of the Grown Up Business Podcast. I hope that got you fired up and ready to grow. The key thing, though, is to remember you get paid on what you get done. So write down the top 3 actions from the show and make sure that you implement those in the next 72 hours. Hey, and while you're at it, make sure you click the links and the resources below this episode to claim free growth resources to help you build the business you desire and deserve. I'll see you on the next episode.